This edition of MacVoices is brought to you by Smile, the makers of the brand new PDF Pen 6, PDF Pen Pro 6, and PDF Pen for iPad and PDF Pen for iPhone. Find out more about all the flavors of PDF Pen at smilesoftware.com. Welcome to MacNotables. This is the home of the Mac experts you want to hear from. I'm Chuck Joiner. Adam Engst is back with us this time. Adam, it's great to see you.
Nice to see you too, Chuck.
But we're not alone this time, Adam.
Well, I won't tell if you don't.
we're live with the Chicago Macintosh user group. Chicago, it's great to see you. Thanks for having us.
Hi.
Woo!
There we go.
And a bunch of owls.
Yeah. Go Hawks, yeah.
Oh, no, it's always fun, I think, to do these user group things. It gets us in front of a live audience, or as live as we ever get. And
it's not touching that one.
Yeah, this is going to be a very strange episode. So, Adam, we haven't talked to you for a little while. It seemed like for a while we were doing user group things regularly, and then we sort of dropped off the map. I
blame the user groups, purely.
yeah, that's the only time you show up.
I'm busy, you know.
Well, the one thing I want to make sure we touch on, I think since the last time you were on, I'm pretty sure, you became the oldest internet publication in existence.
Yeah, we still have to have a little bit of an asterisk. There was this wonderful group, so it was a husband and wife team, Liam and Pauline Ferry, who published a website, first an internet newsletter and then a website called The Irish Emigrant. It was news from Ireland for people who were no longer in Ireland. And they were, a year or so older than we were. And so for the longest time, we had to say we were the oldest technology publication on the internet. Mm. And so, that was our qualification. And but the Ferries retired in February 2012. Took us a while to discover this. Interestingly, the person who told me about the Irish Emigrant being older than Tidbits 16 years ago also told me, sometime last year that, they'd retired. So that was kind of amusing to go back in my email. It's like, oh, look, I got mail from you 16 years ago telling me this. And so we are now the oldest active internet publication. They still have the record for number of years, which we will catch up with them, in a year or so. But yes, it's pretty soon we'll have gotten all those asterisks out of the way, and we'll just be the oldest internet publication.
Yay!
Well, congratulations. That's even if it may be a little premature, so we can get rid of all the asterisks.
I think I forget who said it, something about how much of life is just showing up day after day after day for 23 years. So.
And you've got the battle scars to prove it too. So I guess the thing that's on everyone's mind right now is WWDC next week.
I was thinking it was dinner.
Oh, a dinner?
It's on my mind.
That's on your mind. I already ate.
I'm not really thinking about WWDC, but I will if you want me to.
Well, I think they would like to hear you talk about WWDC. I'm not sure they really care what you're going to have for dinner.
You never know. It could be really impressive.
WWDC is a different kind of animal because we get to see the keynote, and then the developers sort of disappear into Moscone, and they're under NDA, so they can't really talk about what's going on, which is understandable. But I guess we have to focus on then the keynote and what we expect to see that is available publicly. What do you expect?
Yeah, you never really know. Apple has been taking the opportunity the last few years to announce stuff. So partly because they've got a built-in captive happy audience, and it's their opportunity to just sort of say, here's where we are, look at these a few new things that we've done, and then let's get you excited about the big new things that are still coming. So absolutely safe bet that we will see previewed iOS 7 and whatever, macOS 10, 10.9 Maybe they'll go with 10.9. Will they come up with a new big cat? Maybe they'll change the name entirely. They've dropped Mac from OS 10, so it's just OS 10 Mountain Lion, for instance. And so, we don't really know what the details are going to be, and there are plenty of rumors, but whatever, ignore them. It's not worth your time to read the rumors. And so, what will happen there is kind of unknown. But what Apple does at WWDC is they basically have to get developers excited about supporting their new technologies in the operating systems. And so that's why I said it's just a totally safe bet that we'll be seeing the next versions of macOS 10 and iOS there, because Apple's got to be saying, here's what's coming. Here's what we want you to do in your applications. And this is going to be great. You're going to love it. It's going to show up on hundreds of millions of devices. And then then they're going to spend the rest of the week, explaining that stuff in smaller sessions. And so the developers will be able to actually develop to those new APIs and take advantage of, the fact that it's now got, face recognition in your iOS device. So you don't actually have to enter a password. It just looks at you. I don't know. I'm making that up, but you could imagine something like that, and you could imagine apps taking advantage of a face recognition API, so that's some of the sort of thing that Apple wants to say. Well, here's how you implement face recognition APIs, blah blah blah. So it's also relatively common for Apple to introduce some new hardware. I think it's pretty unlikely we'll see major releases. So, probably not a new iPhone or a new iPad or something like that. But, one thing that has been speculated on is a new Mac Pro. The Mac Pro has been way too long in being upgraded. And so the Mac Pro is also the kind of machine that developers use and like. I mean, developers need powerful machines. So, again, it makes sense that Apple would release something or announce something like that at WWDC. So, again, and while they're doing that, Apple has been pretty regular these days in not saying much about their small hardware updates. So it's entirely possible, when they're doing, a new Mac Pro, that's like, oh yeah, and we speed bumped the iMac, and we speed bumped the Mac Mini, and here's a faster MacBook Pro 15, all those kinds of things. They just slide them in. It's easy. It's nice. Gets them all out at once. It doesn't confuse matters by having things trickling out over a long time. So that's the kind of stuff that I expect to see. I don't really expect to see anything truly shocking. It doesn't feel like we're at a point in time where Apple has the next big thing ready and will be taking this opportunity to unveil it.
Okay, there's so many things that I want to get to here.
So many.
The next big thing, I don't know that we can expect Apple to just constantly come up with the next big thing.
We can. We're waiting for flying cars, and that's all there is to it.
That would be nice, but I'm just not convinced. But the question I want to put to you, do we need a new Mac Pro? And before you answer that, think about what the Mac Pro is known for.
Yeah.
And with the exception of maybe some certain video capture cards, can't we do with the iMac that's back there basically the same thing with Thunderbolt? Maybe a few more Thunderbolt ports, but do we really need a new Mac Pro?
I haven't looked into this recently, but Thunderbolt's not really very well supported. There are not many Thunderbolt devices out there. And so, if you are doing high-end audio, high-end video, I'm betting you're still using cards, and depending on them. Plus, you get situations where people are doing interesting things with lots of video out. Again, you need cards. So you are absolutely correct. The market for the Mac Pro has been shrinking for a long time because Apple can do a lot of the things that a Mac Pro used to be required for in these other machines. The big one, I've always had a Mac Pro, right, a tower unit, because I needed double monitors. I refuse to work on a Mac that doesn't have two monitors. And until not that long ago, it was not easy to get reasonable double monitors on anything other than the Mac Pro. So, the Mac Mini can do it relatively well now. The iMac can do it. Tanya's running on a 27-inch iMac with a 27-inch Thunderbolt display next to it, and that works pretty well, even though Apple stupidly doesn't make them the same height. So you have to put the Thunderbolt display, an inch higher so that they match up. What's with that? Why wouldn't you make them the same height if you were gonna just have them there? So, so I think that there's no question that a lot of people who would just automatically have bought the Mac Pro in the past really don't need to, and they really need to rethink why they're using a Mac Pro. That said, you need cards. You need a lot of internal storage. You need just the maximum amount of CPU and memory expansion. That's going to be what the Mac Pro is for.
Okay, so I'll go with all that. Now I'll put my schizophrenic hat on and flip the other direction. At NAB, thanks. At NAB, we saw the first of what appears to be a little bit of a pushback in Final Cut Pro, and that's the kind of program that requires big iron to run. So, is it possible that Apple is going to fight back a little bit with against Premiere and Avid and some of these folks who seem to be trying to eat their lunch right now because of a misperception of what Final Cut Pro is?
Honestly, high-end video is not my world, so I don't really know what's what's being said there. But I would say that Apple has not been doing very well at supporting smaller markets of late. And so, I don't know what effect that's necessarily going to have, but you just don't see Apple putting effort into things other than their big mass market consumer products these days. And so, obviously they have said that we're going to get a new Mac Pro in 2013, and this is the most likely time for it to happen. But what that actually means is this is this sort of throwing a bone to the high end users so they don't just completely jump ship, or what? I don't know. We will have to see what happens going forward. But I know lots of people who are pretty unhappy with the way Apple's been treating Aperture and iWork and all of those programs that if you're a business user of some sort or another, you're not getting the warm fuzzies out of Apple's behavior of late.
No, that's true. And as a
not that Adobe's been giving people the warm fuzzies either in a lot of ways, but
yeah. Well, that's a whole nother discussion. As a business user, I would agree with that. At the same time, I almost admire Apple's restraint that they aren't just continuing to pump new features out for the sake of new features. Now
they can just fix the freaking bugs.
Well, they can fix the bugs, yes. All right. But what I don't want to see is I don't want to see Pages or Keynote turn into Microsoft Word, 2000.
They could just update the programs. They haven't updated them in how many years?
Well, yeah.
That's just, seriously, these programs are ignored. And, we're actually moving away from Pages for Take Control because in the last version of Pages, Apple actually introduced a bug that broke the EPUB export. We had to revert to the previous version. And ignoring the fact that they haven't made actually any improvements in the app, the one minor one was, in fact, EPUB support. Which was kind of cool, but basically they added an export capability. That's the only change that's happened in the app in years and years and years. Whereas what we're switching to, a total blast from the past, is Nicest Writer Pro, and it's not perfect, but holy cats, you report a bug and the developer gives you an alpha the next day. That's the kind of support I like to see out of a program, out of a company that that treats their users like they're valued. And aside from the fact that Nicest Writer does so many things so much better than Pages and Word, it's just so refreshing. And it's no question, it's got its rough edges. It's not perfect in any way, shape, or form. But just nice having a company actually respond And I mean, even to the point where they've started modifying the macro language for us. They've been fixing our bugs, and you talking to the developer. It's just like the old days when you actually, felt like there were people behind these programs sometimes.
Okay, so let's take that in kind of a logical extension. Have we come to a point where, because of the internet, because of social media, because of everything, that we feel like we can and should have a relationship with these developers, that we can and should expect our needs and wants to be instantly gratified?
I think it's gotten a whole lot worse. I think it used to be way better back in the 90s, early on when sort of everything was smaller. The number of developers who would respond to email and just generally talk to you, much higher. You do not see nearly the level of interaction now that I think I used to see back in the day. And so sure, you can talk to people on Twitter and whatnot, but realistically, I do not see the same kind of response as used to happen. I mean, so many of these companies, if you're a successful company, you've got a big company, you're not paying attention to individual users. You just aren't. It's simple. It's just the way it is. But I don't see that happening the way it used to. So maybe it's getting better again with the social media, but it certainly wasn't very good for a long time when you're sort of in between having that direct access. But I don't know. I'm not a huge believer in interaction having gotten better with social media.
That's interesting, because you go to every developer site now and you see, follow us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter.
Follow us, not necessarily we're going to talk back to you.
Well, yeah, but a lot of times if you start shouting at them, they respond, and that's not to say that you need to shout at them. There are a lot of these developers that are responsive. It does seem like the bigger the developer, the less responsive they are, and maybe that's just the nature of the business.
Yeah, no question. And and I don't really expect anything else, but there is a sense that I think also in some ways things seem faster, but when you actually report a bug, and in a program of any size, I'm always surprised when I see it fixed. And when I know that I've reported something and it's been fixed in a time when I'm actually still paying attention to the program, as the Apple's the absolute worst. Bugs just go into the bug reporter to like a roach motel. They just die there. So you never get anything out of Apple. But just in general, I don't know. I mean, I don't feel that developers are really as interested in that. That it used to be a little bit more so with email and frankly with user groups. You see developers come to user groups and talk to people, and some still do. The Smiles of the world still do,
Right.
but a whole lot really don't. And so I'm not saying it's necessarily a horrible thing, but I just think that's the way it is. You really don't see quite as much of that. Certainly in the iOS world, you don't see iOS developers doing that kind of stuff because most iOS developers aren't really earning very much money. And so they don't have, the travel budgets and the presentation budgets and things like that. And the big ones who are big and don't do it for the other reason.
Yeah, but I also see an opportunity, since we're talking about Mac user groups, an opportunity for this kind of thing where someone can basically demo a program in their pajamas from their den. And
I'm not wearing pajamas.
Well, I wasn't going to bring that up.
And I am wearing pants, even though you can't see.
Don't stand up. just don't. Just don't.
Hit my head anyway.
Yeah. No, I think there's an opportunity there. I hope more Mac user groups will reach out to developers, and I hope developers will take advantage of it.
The iOS world is a real problem, though, because the iOS world is infinite. There's too many. I mean, one of the sad truths is we've started ignoring press releases. We just gave up. We had an internal mailing list. We could send email to releases@tibis.com, and it would supposedly distribute to everyone. And it was a mailman mailing list, and I had it moderated so that I could weed out spam, because spam was insane. I mean, just hundreds upon hundreds of spam messages a week. And so the problem was, if I didn't get to whitelisting you at some point, I just gave up, because the queue was 10,000 messages. Actually, when I finally deleted it, it was 29,000 messages, and so it was unmanageable. And so as a result, we just what we talked about. It's like, well, what do we do? We could set up a new address, we could do something different, but then you look at just the volume of totally legitimate press releases. There's more than you can read in a day. You can't do anything with them. It's just noise. And so that's really the problem you run into in the iOS world, is that the legitimate information has become infinite for all practical purposes. So, a user group's going to have, 12 meetings a year. How many iOS developers are you going to be able to get in? Call it 8. If you devote a number of meetings to it every year. 8 out of 150,000, it's almost irrelevant. It's not representative. And not to say they wouldn't do great meetings, they wouldn't be good people, wouldn't be worthwhile. I'm just saying that in any sense of capturing some level of the zeitgeist, or saying this is what's really important. Any 8 apps out of 100, what are we at now? 500,000 apps. I forget what the current number is. It's such a drop in the bucket. So it's crazy. I don't have any answers to this. This is something that has totally thrown us, and I think, frankly, everyone else, for a loop. Because how do you deal with the infinite?
I don't have a good answer, because I get the same press releases. I obviously don't get as many as you do, but I get an awful lot. And the developers that abuse it, that send you 3 press releases in a day, that's just too much. It's just not right, So I don't know. I guess I look at it and think, if for my user group, if I can decide on who I want to invite, you're right. I can't possibly put a dent in the bucket. But if I get, 4 or 5 good meetings, good developers, it's better than nothing.
It's more that I think, again, you look back in the day a little bit, and, if you could get, Microsoft and WordPerfect and FileMaker and, like 5th generation systems, some of the utility developers, you could feel like you'd actually hit this broad swath of the Mac world. You could feel like you'd been representative. And you didn't have to have, the same ones every time. Next time you'd get, I'm blanking on some of the names, but, you'd get Ashton Tate or people who did the other big packages. So you can sort of work your way through. As I said, we're in a completely different space now. And it's really hard to do that. So you have to look at it just as we're putting on an event, we're going to get someone interesting. Not in any way that we're going to have it be representative of, the market, which is what I think we used to do.
You sound like an old man, Adam.
I've been doing this for 23 years and get off my lawn. Which I'm going to cut with a brush hog. So really get off my lawn.
Yeah, really get off your lawn. Okay, so one more question, and then one more question here, and then we'll ask the audience for questions. But what do you think is going to happen with the macOS and the iOS? Are we going to continue to see them come together? Is there a good reason for them to come together, or should they stay separate and distinct?
Well, are you asking what I think should happen, or what I believe is going to happen?
Both.
So, I really do think that Apple is going to be bringing them closer together, and I won't say bringing them closer together, bringing the Mac closer to iOS. And the reason is simply the numbers. You look at what they're selling in terms of iOS devices, 20 20 million a quarter, and you look at how many Macs are selling, vastly fewer. So they really want to, as a smart business, they want to be increasing the number of things they're selling, but computers are just not selling as much as they used to. That people don't need computers to do all the things that they do in comparison with smartphones and tablets anymore. And so I would not be at all surprised to see iOS devices becoming a little bit more computer-like in certain ways. Bigger screens, for instance. Maybe the TV becomes, we've talked about all the rumored TV stuff, but maybe it's not a TV perhaps so much as it's a big screen iOS device, that hangs on your wall and does certain other things, and you can control it via AirPlay from just like you can with an iPhone and an Apple TV now. Yeah, just spitballing here, but the point is, that makes sense with the way Apple thinks about the world right now and the advantage or the opportunities in the world. Whereas just focusing on making the Mac better into a better computer all the time, yeah, I mean, they're not opposed to the concept, but there's no market there. It's not. It's a market that is shrinking, and so the PC market is actually seeing negative growth numbers, whereas Apple's doing better than the PC market, but they still see the writing on the wall, and so I don't see that changing. Now, from my perspective, what I would like to see is more thought put into what it is about computers that make them different from these iOS devices and enhancing those kinds of capabilities. So, again, we've done books about it certainly, and Joe's more than I am, but I don't do much at all on my iPad. Fact is, I mostly work. I mean, I do a lot of work, and I need to do it on a computer because I have two 24-inch monitors and a nice keyboard and a good camera that holds still. It's not constantly jiggling around because I'm holding something. iPads are cool, sure, but they don't actually do the kinds of things I need to do for my work. They are very useful for other things, none of which I really need hugely. I love my iPhone. I use my iPhone all the time. It's with me every minute of the day. But that's because the iPhone does things that my computer doesn't. And the iPad is sort of that in between where it doesn't really do things that my computer doesn't. And for the things that I need to do, either I don't want to do them at all because I shouldn't be working, or I will do them on a machine where I can work much, much faster and more effectively. But I'm old and I want you off my lawn.
Yeah. Well, your point is well taken. I remember the time, and we all remember the time, when you couldn't wait for the next computer because it was bigger, it was faster, it was this, it was that. And we've hit this interesting point now where, yes, it would be nice, in my case, to be able to process video faster. But for most of the things you do at the office, for most of the things that most of our audience does at home, you've got enough power. You may need more storage capacity because we were talking pre-show about photos and all. But for the most part, the computer it can last a lot longer. And so Apple as a business has to go and seek out new markets and find new places to expand.
That's absolutely the case. And I mean, it's interesting. Tanya has been someone who has complained nonstop about her computers. Her computers are never fast enough for her. And this has been true, for 20 plus years. But it's more or less stopped. With the iMac and a modern iMac and a 27-inch matching Thunderbolt display, she has more screen real estate that she knows what to do with, and the computer is fast enough. She's just not waiting for anything. I'm running on a 2008 Mac Pro right now, and I do have 10 gig of RAM and an SSD, but even still, there are some things which I don't know, isn't quite as fast as I would like. So I could still go faster, and I have 24-inch monitors. I don't know if I can have 27s or not. Once you get to a certain point, actually, you can't see the sides. They're too far away. So, I mean, I always used to say, he who dies with the most pixels wins. But it turns out that's not true. You can have more pixels than is actually useful. Because you don't want to be, like leaning over to read your documents on the far side of the computer. So.
No, but it looks really cool.
No, it does look really cool.
Yes, yeah.
It's one of those video walls.
Yeah.
You feel like you're being radiated.
And yeah, and pretty soon you'll be the Minority Report thing with all this.
I have a Chromebook Pixel with a touchscreen. And the touchscreen is really pretty interesting, that the whole thing about how, you're not going to sit there like the whole time. I mean, Jobs is right. You're not going to sit there the whole time. But when you're with a laptop, your hand's right there anyway. It's not far. It's not, if you're going from the keyboard to the screen, not very far. And so, they're still on the edge of building it in to be really useful. But, for scrolling and that kind of stuff, it's there. It works.
What's the device? And I can't think of the name of it. It was on a Kickstarter that would let you, small little device, but it would apparently let you, use hand gestures. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, it was at Macworld. It wasn't a device, was it? I think they were using your iPhone. It was basically it was a dongle for the iPhone. That's what it was. So that you could hold the iPhone. Let's pull my iPhone out here. So you could hold the iPhone and use it as a 3D mouse, because it used the iPhone's accelerometer and stuff like that. And you could also then program different stuff into an app on the iPhone, so you could get a multi-button mouse that had special features. It basically turned the iPhone into a generic controller, or I should say, a programmable controller. And one of the things that was cool about it was that you could kind of shape things in 3D and all that. Really not useful for those of us who mostly write, but very, very cool. So yeah, all this stuff is going to be tried, and this is, I don't know if you want to go down this road exactly, but I am so sick of people whining about Google Glass. The fact is, it's going to be tried. We've, all these things, the smartwatches. Oh, people, I don't want a smartwatch. Let's go. People won't be paying attention to me. Get over yourself. This is technology. You can't stop it. You have to have the discussions about how it can and should be used, but you don't whine about it ahead of time.
True.
That there's no utility in doing that. That all the people I shouldn't say all people, most of the people who are whining about Google Glass have at best seen it briefly. It's not like they've had compromising pictures taken of them. You can take compromising pictures with an iPhone today. You can record people with an iPhone with no one noticing. It's really easy because, you're sitting on the subway, people are sitting there reading their iPhone. You don't know that they're not recording video. You don't. There's nothing different. And the simple fact is that we're going to be seeing technology moving ever closer into that kind of personal bubble, whether it's the watch, whether it's the glasses, whether it's something in the ear. That's going to be happening because, we thought of it in science fiction, so why not?
No, and of course, I love it. There was an article I read or I saw this week that said, Google Glass versus Apple's smartwatch, and who will win? It's like, let's see, Google Glass is not shipping, and the smartwatch is a rumor, but somebody's declaring
Google Glass is shipping, but Apple smartwatch is totally a rumor. So
yeah, it's like
at least Google Glass is a technology that people have used. Whether or not it's it's certainly not mass market or anything, but at least it's people have had their hands on it. So yeah, no, it's that's, you want to talk about another one of my pet peeves right now is sort of the fake controversy and nonsense in the media, just to be able to, kick in those to generate those little dopamine hits of, ooh, gotta read that, ooh, gotta read that, ooh, gotta read that. And without actually saying anything or having anything to say, that's like having a big article. Who's going to win? Godzilla or the moth? It's fantasy. Get over yourself. You're writing about fiction, and as long as you realize that, if you realize that, you wouldn't be publishing this stuff on in theory legitimate technology publications. But we did a really good article about wearable computing. Jeff Porton wrote for us a little while ago. Where he talks a lot about the social acceptance of technology and how, for instance, when you go to dinner with people, do you take your iPhone out of your pocket and set it on the table? Do you set it face down or face up? What happens if it if it buzzes or rings or whatnot? And how have social cues and systems come to accept these? And he was talking about things like smartwatches and Google Glass in that vein. If you see, actually, he tested looked at a couple of the smartwatches at CES. He's like, no, okay, so if someone's looking at their watch in a social situation, that usually means they're bored. And if you're talking to someone and they look at their watch, that means they're trying to get away from you. And we know that. I mean, that's what that motion means. But what if that watch is now a smartwatch, and it's now giving you your Facebook posts and your tweets and telling you that you've got email or something like that? It's changing what those social acceptances are. And so we'll have to really, again, we don't get to decide. It just happens. But, and it happens, I'm still, I'm old. I think it's rude when people start talking on their cell phones in public. Like if you're having a conversation with a group of people and a cell phone rings and someone just starts talking on it. Like, no, that's rude. At least walk away from the group, that kind of stuff. But younger people, they've been socialized in a different way. And for them, it is not rude. And it doesn't upset them either to do it or have it done to them. So, all this stuff is changing. A lot of people of our generation maybe not so happy about having our pictures taken without our knowledge. Go 25 years younger, 30 years younger, those people are constantly having their pictures taken by their friends with cell phones. They don't think twice about it, even when they probably should.
What's this our generation stuff? And now, a word from Smile, the makers of the brand new PDF Pen 6 and PDF Pen Pro 6, the best utility for working with PDF documents. As good as PDF Pen and PDF Pen Pro were, PDF Pen 6 and PDF Pen Pro 6 are better. And now, both are even better with the recent update to version 6.0.2. Smile has added the option to toggle autosave in versions, has cut way down on memory usage, respects document permissions for the insert page numbers function, and lots more. And all that is on top of the ability to export PDFs to Microsoft Word, a new editing bar, Retina display optimization, drag and drop to reorder library items. The list just goes on and on. Whether you get PDF Pen 6 or PDF Pen Pro 6 from the Smile website, or PDF Pen 6 or PDF Pen Pro 6 in the Mac App Store, go get PDF Pen, or better yet, PDF Pen Pro. And don't forget about PDF Pen for iPhone and PDF Pen for iPad. PDF Pen is the essential utility for working with the PDFs you encounter every day. Thanks to Smile for their support of MacVoices. How about if we ask the audience if there are any questions right now? Because Adam and I can riff on a lot of things for a long time. But anything that you'd like to ask or have answered? Anyone?
Chuck, I'm just wondering, just about, you mentioned user groups. What do you see in terms of the strength or the maintenance of user groups? Here in Chicago, and we've got a great number of people here, but frankly, our group dwindled. A lot of it had to do with spatial considerations, not having a place to meet, etc. What do you see with Mac user groups in particular? Are there more? Are they holding their own? Are we a dying breed? Are we dinosaurs now?
Yes to everything.
And get off my lawn.
And get off my lawn, yeah. I think that user groups need to evolve. I think some have done a great job of evolving. I think some have not. And, they're dwindling very quickly. I think the groups that are recognizing that a user group meeting is as much of a social event as it is a technology event are the ones that are delivering. I mean, sure, you can't just get together with friends and pretend it's not a group. or a user group. But those are where the friendships are built. That's where human interaction happens. I see that happening a lot more. I do think that this, in spite of what Adam said, or even because of what Adam said, if you can reach out to some people and see if they are willing to speak to your group. Now, it doesn't cost anybody anything. There was a time, as Adam said, where they had to have travel budgets and they would do user group tours, and they were expensive. Now, anybody with a webcam can fire it up, Skype or iChat or whatever, share their screen and do a pretty darn decent demo as if they were right there in front of you. So I think there are a lot of opportunities for user groups. I do think that one of the big challenges facing user groups is the young people. The young people just aren't showing up because they don't perceive it to be cool or fun or interesting because it's part of their background. It's what they use in school. It's what, in fact, they've used it since elementary school. So they don't have the love affair with it that we do. And that's a real challenge. And so, are we dinosaurs? Are we going to go away? Maybe so. I think it could be sooner. Excuse me. I think it could be later rather than sooner. But I think everybody has to adapt. And, my group in Hershey, we stopped really trying to go out and beat the bushes for members. Now we just say everybody has to come and have a good time. And, if we can share some tech and have some answers, get some answers to those people, that's great. But it has to be a good time. And Adam, you see it a little bit differently, I'm sure.
Well, there's two things that I've seen that have been very successful, almost hugely successful, that I have seen being successful for user groups right now is the Rochester group has changed their meeting style. So instead of getting someone like me to stand up there and talk for an hour or whatever, which is probably okay because I hope I can actually talk for an hour and be entertaining for an hour. But if you're getting random people who are maybe not very good at it, because we've all been to those meetings where there's someone who's just kind of droning on and on and on and on, that can be really problematic. So what they did is they said, okay, our meetings are, I forget, an hour and a half long, something like that. And we're going to chunk it up into these 15-minute sections. And they are really specific about their 15 minutes. They even actually have a timer. They have a big clock, and for one of the 15-minute sections, for instance, they'll get 3 people in doing 5-minute demos of, usually I think it's often developers in the Rochester area who are, want to show off their apps. And it's it works really well for keeping it kind of fun and fast moving. So it's a different kind of ethos to the same kind of information. And again, making a little bit more of an entertainment rather than just, let's get together and share some information. And so I think that's something which actually can be helpful. The other group that I've been just shocked at how successful they've been, admittedly they sort of got the perfect demographic, is the Naples mug down in Florida. And it's the reason why they're so successful in part is it's largely a retirement area. And all of their people have been given iPads. Wow. And so it's a bunch of retired folks whose kids and grandkids, have given them iPads and want them to use them, and and these people want help. And so, I don't know if this is continued, but I know they advertised some, they were going to do an iPad, specific special interest group, and they had something like 380 people try to come. They had to turn people away because the fire marshal was going to get mad. It was just crazy. And then I talked to them the next month, and I think they had 200 people or something. It was just nuts. So it was back. It was like back in the days of BMUG and the Boston Computer Society and some of those huge user groups that used to pack auditoriums. And so I do agree with Chuck that young people, for the most part, aren't interested in user groups, but they don't do groups in general. So I don't take it personally. It's not you. It's just society has changed, and that kind of coming together socially doesn't really happen for those people. I mean, one of the somewhat shocking things is that young people are actually getting driver's licenses much less than they used to because they got Facebook. They don't need to go to the mall. And so, again, the world's changing because of this technology, and some things are going to fall by the wayside, and user groups are going to be one of them. But not for a number of years yet, is my belief. Particularly if the groups sort of change to again be more entertaining, more fun, making sure everyone's having a good time, and hopefully appealing to the demographics that do appreciate the concept of getting together for a group.
But that puts a bit of a burden on you, okay? And I'm serious. That means that you can't rely on Russ or Barbara or anybody else there to come and do a presentation, and you come and sit like a bump on a log and then go to dinner. That means that everybody has to get involved, even if it's just for the 5-minute demos Adam's talking about. The Rochester model seems like a really great thing. It's just that you have to have people to do it, because 2, 3, 4 meetings and people start to burn out if they don't have some help. So it's incumbent upon you to value your group and contribute in some fashion. And with iOS apps, it's not that hard anymore.
And let's face it, there's so many of them. It's not like you're not going to know some app. I mean, God, just trying to keep up with the weather apps has been bogging me down recently, because I'm actually pretty particular about my weather apps, and WeatherBug, which I used to love, has gotten worse. And I'm really quite peeved about this fact. So I've been looking at all the weather apps, and I'm like, there's another one. Oh, there's another one. So, I take my weather very seriously.
Okay, so we've got another question on the floor.
Yes, for Adam, about backup storage.
Yes.
I have 2 computers. I have a MacBook and MacBook Pro. Can I use the same unit to store the backup, both of them, or do they have to have separate backup?
So when you're designing your backup strategy, there's 3. I mean, in an ideal backup strategy, there's 3 things you need to keep in mind. 1, a bootable duplicate. So, and some of this you can sort of, you can skimp here and there, because you need the bootable duplicate. So if your Mac's drive dies, you can come back up very quickly. If you're not really doing anything and then taking a day to get back up and running isn't a big deal, maybe the bootable duplicate isn't as important. But for a lot of people, bootable duplicate's key. The one that really is key is versioned backups. And Time Machine is sort of the classic there in terms of what you can use to get version backups. And the reason why I said it's not perfect is that if you have to restore entirely, install macOS 10 from scratch and restore from a Time Machine backup, it's going to take you a while. You're going to be down for hours. And so for some of us, that's a real problem. The third thing you need to keep in mind is off-site backups. And a lot of people don't really think about this, and you sort of hate to, pull the scare tactics, but, down the road from me a couple of years ago, Owego, the town of Owego, the entire town flooded. I mean, people lost everything. And, it wasn't one of those things where people had time to, they weren't predicting that it was going to be that bad. And so, that's the kind of situation where, you hope those people grabbed their computers and got out, but, maybe they didn't. And if you didn't have an offsite backup, the water was going to ruin your computer and your backup. So those are the 3 things to keep in mind. So all that said, if you've got one big drive, say you've got a big external 2 terabyte drive or 3 terabyte drive, it is absolutely fine to use that drive to back up multiple computers. Now, you do have to keep in mind, of course, that you've put all your eggs in that one basket as far as backups go. And so, what I would recommend is thinking about, the possible things that could go wrong. So you could have, a file corrupted and you'd want to go to Time Machine and get it back. Okay, if I lost my backup, I could make a new one pretty quickly. That wouldn't be too bad. But again, if there was a theft or a fire or a sprinkler system goes off, and ruins the backup drive, that's when you need to make sure you've got something going on off-site. Just having one drive might not be ideal. So, So there's two kind of basic ways to get an offsite backup. One is internet backup using something like CrashPlan, which we really like. There's other services too, but CrashPlan's the best one. And we have another book about that specifically. And then the other thing you can do is simply take a drive off-site. So don't have one drive, have two, and store one at a friend's house or your kid's house or your office or whatever it is, just so it's not the same, and then swap them every so often. And so that's the kind of thing that you can do to protect yourself, hopefully with a minimum of fuss. And that's the kind of stuff that Take Control of Backing Up Your Mac, the second edition, which is coming out next week, will discuss, talking about all the current backup software, Joe's recommendations for, hardware, all that kind of stuff will be really laid out well in that book.
Thank you. And how safe is iCloud as an alternate storage?
How safe is iCloud? I have no reason to believe that iCloud is not safe, but it should not be considered a backup in any way, shape, or form.
Storage. I recommend as a storage of some of your photographs.
Well, for photo, well,
would it be considered an outer storage?
So the way Apple has changed iCloud from when it was MobileMe basically means that it really cannot use it as backup. So you can do a couple of things in iCloud. You can use PhotoStream. So you can have all the photos you take go up to iCloud and then sort of come down to other devices. But that's limited, and I can't reel off the limitations right off the top of my head, but it's like 1,000 photos and then 30 days or something like that. So not a backup there. Then you can store documents. So if you have a Pages document, you can store it in iCloud, and that will and then be able to access it at any other machine that you've got. Again, that's good, but it's only that document, and it's only Pages document, so it's not really a backup. So it's another copy. And there's nothing wrong with more copies, but you never want to think about that. And you don't anymore have iDisk, which was Apple's sort of cloud storage system. So there's nothing like that related to iCloud. So again, nothing wrong with iCloud, but it really doesn't play in the backup space at all. And you have to think, it gets a little bit more confusing with a cloud service like Dropbox, which does actually have some sort of backup-related features. But even there, Dropbox is only backing up the stuff, or only storing stuff in your Dropbox folder. And it stores versions, which is good, but they're hard to get back to if you need to actually do some significant stuff there. And and you can't possibly store your operating system in there. You can't store your applications in there. You can't store all your music even in there because it would be way too expensive. So it's again, all of these things are useful, but they don't really quite play in the backup space. And Joe's got a really good discussion of sort of what you can consider backup and what it really isn't. And I think it's one of the things that's really important about backup is you don't want to think about it. You want it to be completely automatic. You want it to just happen, and you want it to back up everything. Because the more you think, the more you are putting yourself in a position where you can make a mistake, and you will, because you're human. You don't want to be in a situation where you've got some, oh yeah, I forgot about that file, or oh, I'm not backing up that folder, but why did I put something there? The stories I've heard, I've heard of people who stored their dissertation in the macOS 10 system folder. Why? I don't know. I don't know how they managed it, but they did, and then they lost it because it wasn't being backed up. That's why you do serious backups of the entire disk. And so you don't have to think. You don't want to do any kind of if, ands, buts. Well, maybe I don't have space. I'll just, you have a big enough disk, you back up everything, and you let it run. You have the backups happening all the time on a schedule. And that way, you don't have to think about it.
I do that. I just do it on one computer, not the other. Now, one is the Snow Leopard, and the other one is Lion operating systems. Does that matter?
I don't think that should matter. If you were concerned about it, what you could do is you could partition the single drive they were both backing up to, so that they would appear to both be backing up to individual volumes on the same drive. And so like let's assume, for the purposes of argument, that two hard disks are roughly the same size. The two computers. So you could just say 1 terabyte for each of you on a 2 terabyte drive, 1 terabyte for each of you, make 2 volumes, and then point one of them at one of the volumes and the other one at the other volume. And that way they're just completely separate. I don't think it's absolutely necessary, but that might give you another way to think about it.
Thank you.
There's one other thing too that I've seen more than one person do, and that is, I store all my documents in my documents folder, so therefore if I back up my documents folder, everything is fine. And it is, except
right?
except if you think about it, if you go to the store right now and buy a brand new Mac and then start to install all the software that you have, along with the license keys and along with your internet settings and along with all those fiddly little settings and tweaks and things that you have used to customize your system over time, you'll spend a week doing it minimum. I mean, it's just I don't even. It makes me shudder to think about.
It's not even a week. It's just it'll be nonstop for months.
Yeah,
because you're I run that program. Oh, okay. And again, keep in mind, there's lots of stuff that's not in documents. I mean, if you can even think, I'll back up just my home folder, and that's again better, but not even still, because something like Mail doesn't put its files in the documents folder. Mail puts its files in the library folder, and so you don't back up the library folder. Oh well, there goes all your mail, which maybe it's not a problem because you use IMAP and you can just bring it all back down from the server. But what if you have old local mail? That's just gone, So again, you never want to think. Back up everything. And, actually where this really comes up a lot is with photos, where people are saying, my photos are really important, I'm going to back them up. Good, that's nothing wrong with that. But the best way to back up your photos is as part of everything else. Because again, as soon as you start trying to say, I'm going to back up my photos very specifically, you're going to miss something. Guarantee it. And so if you don't have that full backup of everything as well, and you try to restore the photos, you're gonna miss something. You'll regret it.
And what you will find is that right now you walk into Best Buy or one of the big box stores, that's $100 for that drive. That's $150 for that drive. And then when things crash and burn, you think, oh my God, $150 was nothing. You would happily pay twice that much just to get your stuff back. So don't be cheap about it.
Other questions?
I have one. The 2007 original iMac 24-inch. When it came out in the month, will I be able to, do you think, in your opinion, next OS will still be good? It's a Core 2 Dual. It's the last one that was still compatible out on it. Anything before that wasn't. Do you think they're going to move that up? Next release. Or do I have to get a new Mac? I don't want to keep up.
I'm not sure I can quite hear the question.
Adam, I think he said he's got a 2007 Mac.
Yes, will it
be
compatible with the next OS 10.9?
Right, and do we think it will be compatible with the new version 10.0.9?
No idea. Apple. There's two reasons why Apple sets. I really don't know. And if you were on the edge of mountain lion compatibility, the odds are no. Just from the standpoint of Apple's always moving things forward. And they do that for two reasons. One is that they really do want you to buy new stuff. That they would like it if you would just buy a new Mac for every year. But and they recognize that's not realistic. But they want to give you reason to upgrade every 3 to 5 years. And then helping encourage that with a system requirement is one of the things they can do. So that's one reason. Another reason is it is slower, and it's possible they're going to be doing things in the new OS that will take advantage not so much of just raw CPU processing power, but some of the other niceties that come with the newer chips, the newer graphics processing units. So I think that there's a lot of situations where if you're on the edge, they don't want you to have a bad experience because it's slow. And so they're just going to say, you can't upgrade because it might not be the best possible experience. It'll run. I mean, there's no question that it would run at some basic level, and someone will probably figure out how to hack it to do that. But Apple doesn't want to be on the hook for a bad user experience. And then the third reason why they tend to drop machines out is what's called the test matrix. That it actually is a fairly significant effort to test that these new operating systems do what they say they're going to do. And so what they're trying to say is that, we only want to test, 24 Macs, not another 15, that are just on the edge. And that will actually, they calculate this stuff. That will make our testing job take, 2 months instead of 5 months. And so that's the sort of thing where, it makes a whole lot of sense for them to knock off some of the older machines purely to keep the testing job reasonable. So again, I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if it's not supported. You're already talking a 6-year-old Mac, but you might. I certainly wouldn't think about buying anything until you see what happens at WWDC. Who knows what will be announced, and they may say, 10.9 is going to come out, and here's going to be the cutoff, because developers need to know that. I mean, developers need to know what is the cutoff for this, because developers care very deeply. So, hopefully we'll know more soon. But you can assume that any computer you bought today would be compatible with whatever 10.9 is going to be. Apple won't cut off current buyers in any way, shape, or form. So, my 2008 Mac Pro, a little on the edge, frankly. That I wouldn't be surprised if it fell by the wayside as well. So, but the last 2 years, probably pretty safe.
And just to chime in on that too, because we had this discussion at my office as to how often we need to update computers. Right now, you're doing a lot of things that your Mac was not designed to do. I mean, you're running software that it was never designed to run because it didn't exist at that point. In 2007, when you got it, it was state of the art. Now, not so much. So, back then, Twitter, Facebook, were not really there the way they are now. We certainly weren't streaming video quite the way we are now. I mean, there's so many things that you're doing now with your Mac you haven't even thought about that have been upgraded, enhanced, improved.
It's holding up pretty good, though. I watched 2 movies this afternoon on Justin.tv. There's no hiccups. If there is, it might be because the signal's slow from Comcast. So.
And that was partly why I was saying that it's things that you wouldn't necessarily expect. So, there's new security features built into the chips and to the CPUs. And so it's not that it will necessarily be slow, but that the operating system won't necessarily have the same level of security capabilities running on older chips. So, it's a complex decision, and I think overall, I think Apple's done it pretty well. They always knock someone off the back of the boat, and the person who's right on the edge there is unhappy. But when you look back at it, you think, well, yeah, that kind of made sense. You got to draw the line in the sand somewhere, or frankly, you end up where Microsoft was, some time ago, where you're supporting stuff that's 10, 15 years old, and it's just crazy, and it's actually hamstringing all the modern things because you can't possibly keep all the old hardware, again, not just from the CPU time, but from just all the other advances that have come in play. So so you do want a certain level of throwing the babies out with the bathwater, but as long as it's not unreasonable, we don't think, oh my goodness, I bought that last year and it's not supported. That's crazy. People will scream when they think it's unreasonable. But on the whole, Apple's handled that pretty well.
Other questions? Yes, sir.
Just getting back to what you were talking about before, in the financial industry, the new CEO of Apple, he's been getting hammered more as stock plummets. But he's assuring people, oh, don't worry, we got all sorts of new products coming out and whatnot. You touched on that new TV that he says is still a hobby. How close to market do you think they're coming to bringing that?
Why, if I knew, I could make the stuff. I really don't know. That Apple plays things very, very close to the vest, and I actually approve of that. That there are times and places to show your hand. So, I mean, Microsoft legitimately, because they work much more with enterprise customers, they talk about what's coming much more. And that's entirely appropriate for enterprises because enterprises need to make plans, a year out, 2 years out, 3 years out. And so they need to know what's coming so that they can build that into their plans. Apple's doing consumer level stuff. You don't really need to, there isn't a reason why someone needs to plan their next TV purchase. And so, there's no benefit for them in any way tipping their hand. That said, what we're seeing with Apple financially is that Apple has grown and grown and grown, and they're starting to turn into one of those very large companies that really can't grow the way it used to. I'm not saying they're not going to continue to grow, they're not going to make money hand over fist, because they are. But it just stands to reason that you can't, when you're this high, you can't increase the percentage, at the same rate. It's not possible. And so, I think Apple is very aware of that, and that's why we're seeing a lot more of the dividends. We're seeing the stock buyback plan, all those kinds of things, which, Apple sort of has to grow up. I won't say grow up because it's not like we're not a grown-up company before. They have to grow into becoming a really big company, which is a different thing. I mean, it's a different beast from, a middling-sized big company. I have to imagine that Apple has all sorts of things they believe could be the next big thing in the labs, and they are trying hard to figure out, when is the best time to release them, from all sorts of reasons. Again, one of the things we run into nowadays, like what you see with the iPhones, is it has to be coordinated worldwide, for God's sakes, because of all of the cell carriers. Mm-hmm. It's just way more complicated than it used to be. And if Apple releases something, think about the manufacturing they have to have spun up beforehand. They can't exactly do Kickstarter and say, hey, so who'd buy a TV? And then we'll get around to manufacturing it in a year or two. So they have, if the kind of stuff they're doing now, it has to be completely and utterly plotted out years in advance, and that's just hard. So, so again, the fact that they may be working on TV, for all we know, it's one of those things where, they've had it, like ready to go, to pull the trigger on manufacturing for years, and they just don't see the financial upside being there for one reason or another. Maybe the screens and the size they want are still too expensive. Maybe they feel like they can't get enough manufacturing capacity to meet the demand, whatever it is. Or maybe the market's not really there. How often do you buy a TV? Probably not every 2 years. So that may be a market where they sort of think, wow, we could really do that. But then they look at it and go, yes, but we'd sell one TV to someone every 10 years, and that's not good enough. So I don't know. I wish I could claim to have some kind of inside information, but I really don't in that. The one thing that I do find interesting about the TVs is Apple likes to have connections to the media industries. And so, you keep thinking Apple might do something along, that would kind of bring in the media industries in some way, shape, or form. But again, they don't like partnering with other companies if they can avoid it. So, if they can't control the whole shebang, they're a little less likely to be interested. So I know that wasn't an answer, but hopefully it was illuminating in some other regard.
No, you touched on a lot of things. I've got a Roku box just to keep myself from going out and buying a smart TV. And one of the channels that I watch is CNBC Europe, and they had some venture capitalists on from Germany just the other night. he was talking about how Android is just going to completely blow Apple away in terms of, oh, it's much easier to use or this, that, or much easier to develop for and all this. And I have a Jelly Bean tablet just because I like the size, 7-inch, and I didn't want to spend over $300 on an iPad mini just yet. But if you download stuff from Google Play, not everything that they have out there works with your device. And I'm thinking this compared to my iPad just absolutely blows.
It's like the old PC market. I mean, it's the same argument we've heard before. The PC will take over because it's everywhere and so ubiquitous, blah, blah, blah. Fine, but then the PC was hard to work with on a user level, and not everything was compatible. And the beauty with Apple was everything works together, relatively easily. So I think that's the same argument. I think
it's absolutely true. Although the one thing that I will say is that I think that what is different about that analogy, or what has changed that analogy, is it used to be that the Mac was both easy to use and powerful under the hood in terms of being customizable and hackable, and you could do interesting things that were not intended. And that's been getting a lot harder on the Mac, and it's almost entirely impossible on iOS.
Oh yeah.
So Apple is going much more in that direction of, this is an appliance, you don't mess with it. And again, nothing wrong with that. That's an attitude, but there's some of us who like to mess with it, who like to make it do what we wanted very explicitly rather than what some developer would allow us to do. And so, again, one of the reasons why I don't use iOS more on the iPad is because I can't do some of the things that I, live and die by. I mean, Keyboard Maestro is a macro utility, just came out version 6. Love this app, because it lets me automate stuff. When I just did a stupid little macro yesterday, we're like, oh, how come is it every time I want to record a podcast version of Tidbits, I have to reset the input volume of my microphone? Why does it change? I don't know why it changes. I can't figure that out. But it's always wrong every week. And so it's like, oh, well, this is stupid. I'll make a Keyboard Maestro macro that sets the input volume appropriately, launches Audio Hijack Pro, launches stickies, which I need to read my intros and outros, and I'm done. One command, all those 3 things happen, and yet there's no conceivable way to do that kind of thing in iOS. And if Apple had their way, it wouldn't be any way to do it on the Mac. I mean, Keyboard Maestro isn't allowed in the Mac App Store because it breaks all the rules. Apple doesn't want to let apps do that kind of thing anymore. So, that's my concern with sort of where things are going, in terms of that old PC analogy, Windows analogy. You used to say, oh yeah, you can do anything with Windows, but it's going to be hard and confusing. And whereas, you could actually do it all with the Mac, and it would be cool and interesting too. And now it's feeling like you may not, if someone hasn't thought of it for you, you're not going to be able to do it on the Mac. Not so much on the Mac, but certainly on iOS. Where there may be an app for that, but if there isn't, you're out of luck.
You mentioned before, though, something that fits with that Apple has always, and now maybe even more so, been for the consumer market. And while you're right, there is a percent, but I think a small percent of the Adam Engsts and maybe the Chuck Joiners of the world who like to tweak, call it hack, like to push the envelope, probably the majority of computer users, both PC and are not the kind to do that. Maybe you like to set your background screen, your screen image, and what do you call it, your wallpaper. I mean, that kind of stuff. You pick whatever you want, but the average, probably the biggest percentage of users of any device have never been ones to want to do the things you do. They wanted, in a sense, simpleness. They wanted clarity, and even in the Mac world, because I do some tech support for average people, and even the Mac, they can't handle it. So I'm thinking, that even way back Macs and PCs, and now many, many, many people really just want to use it and want it easy. And in that sense, again, the fact that you download stuff in the App Store and it'll work with your device is a real selling point as opposed to what my colleague here mentioned.
And my only criticism of that argument is that does not have to be either or.
Mm-hmm.
Apple is making it either or, and I think that is the wrong decision.
Yeah.
That if they drive away all the power users, honestly, if I were in a situation where I had to use iOS or Windows, no question. End of story. Wouldn't even think twice about it. There is just no question. It's an operating system. It's not a toy. iPads are great. You can do many cool things on them. You cannot run a business on them. You just can't. And that's not to criticize them. It's just to say that they are not that kind of device. And I need a device that I can do that kind of stuff on. And there's a lot of people like me too who, you need to whip off a quick spreadsheet, and you need to attach it in email, and you need to be able to copy and paste between apps without having to, jump through hoops, or send information from one app to another. Again, I'm this sort of user who has 15 or 20 apps running at all times, and I switch between them very quickly. And you can do some of that stuff in iOS, and there's even certainly things in iOS that you can do that are even easier than on a Mac within one app, and that's it.
But the only thing, Adam, I've got to fight you a little bit there. You're comparing the macOS, Windows, iOS, and man, that's completely different. What
I'm suggesting is that Apple's pushing us more and more towards iOS.
Well, maybe the things are going to look
on
like
that
iOS,
device,
but maybe not. I think you made the point. There needs to be what we call a computer, as opposed to an iPad, a completely consumer. I don't know what you call it.
Here's the thing: a computer is a general purpose device.
Correct.
It does not do one thing. This is actually the beauty of iOS, that when you run an app, that device, when I switch into WeatherBug here, this iPhone is now a dedicated weather device. That's really neat for little things.
It's not a computer.
It's not a computer. No. A computer is something where I can say, I have this task that I need to accomplish. I may be the only one in the world who needs to accomplish this task, but I can put together tools to make my task easier. That I don't have to do every portion of my task independently, and in one thing, and then in the next thing, and then the next thing, and all that. And so that's what I worry about Apple moving away from, with too much emphasis on the consumer market. And I think that's something that, we talked a little bit about the Mac Pro. No, the Mac Pro is not nearly as necessary as it used to be. But that's why I think it's important that Apple keep the Mac Pro around, because there's people who really do need to put 4 PCI cards in something. And they need to have, however many gigabytes of RAM, because they're doing processing of massive data sets and all that. They do. They're out there and they're doing interesting things that no one else is, and that's great. That the beauty of the apps is that in theory, everyone needs a weather app. You can sell hundreds of millions of weather apps. You might be able to. We actually we commission software. We have software that helps us with our podcasts, and it's used by 10 people. That's the market, 10 people. And so, but that's something you can do on a computer because it's easy and it cost me a couple $100 as opposed to, thousands and thousands of dollars for an iOS app. So, again, not criticizing iOS from that standpoint. I'm just saying that I think it's really important we don't lose perspective about what the computers really bring to us as, we want to, remember those ads, about the people who think, would think different, those are the people who make things move forward. And we want to make sure that we're not dropping them out of the target market.
You are presuming, and I guess maybe my interpretation, when you hear that, that Apple is moving to make the macOS and the iOS more alike, in my mind, what would be genius, and what I'm hoping, isn't that they make the Mac into just a larger, more powerful iOS device. What I'm hearing or thinking is that they'll look at the look of it. They're trying to make so that you can switch from your all-purpose device to your specialty toy or utility more easily. And the reason I say that, and if they do that, that's genius. Because the way I say that is, again, I do some support for some average middle-aged, older people in their 90s and 80s. And what I notice is, and in some of them, because their adult kids think it's going to be easier, I just had the situation, a couple that got a MacBook, they got a MacBook Pro and an external monitor, and the wife, who's in her mid-80s, very sharp woman, her son, who's a Mac fanatic on the East Coast, bought her an iPad. One, that way hubby can use when he's using the laptop, she's got the iPad. Great idea. And I watched. There's such a difference. She's, now maybe because she's older, she can't easily go between the two Apple devices. They are, and I look at mine, they're different. And again, they do different things, but they also feel different to her. So if Apple can make it so that not that the computer changes, and it still is the wonderful device that you can put your program on, that Maestro, whatever thing, but if for the average person, when it launches, when it boots up, there's a look and feel of some basic things that are identical or similar enough to the iOS devices, that's pure genius. Because then people can go between those without struggling. Because now they are so different. It takes adaptation. You've got to wrench your brain one way or the other. And if Apple can get away from having people having to do that without sacrificing the qualities of each type of device, that would be, I think, phenomenal. And that's what I'm hoping that they're doing when they say they're making them more like each other. That's what I interpret that to mean.
Russ, how are we doing on time?
Pretty good. We should.
Sorry, I missed some of the end of that because at 9 o'clock my Mac mutes itself, so it doesn't wake me up, or it doesn't make noise after someone might be going to sleep. I'm like, how come I stopped hearing noises? Oh, right, it's 9 o'clock.
It's a keyboard maestro, yeah.
It is.
I should have known.
Do you have any? There was a commentator that says that Apple needs to open up their iOS, whatever that means, as like Android or Chrome in order to compete. Do you have any perspective on that?
So the question of what open up means in regard to iOS is that there are certain default apps on iOS. You have Mail, you have Calendar, you have Safari, and you can have alternatives to them. So, for instance, there's a wonderful calendar called Fantastical. Great app. Way better than Apple's. Far, far better than Apple's. There are, for instance, I don't use Mail. I use Gmail on the desktop, so I find the Gmail app to be much, much better than Apple's Mail app on iOS. Safari doesn't actually bother me. Some people prefer Chrome. So the good browser there's also, Atomic browser and Dolphin browser that have different other features like ad blocking and things that you can't get from Safari. And so when people talk about opening up iOS, what they're saying is, why do we have these default apps that we can't replace? Because when you tap a share button in some app and you want to mail something, you can only use Apple's Mail app. When you want to open something in the web browser, you can only do it in Safari because they don't let anything else become that default app. And we did in fact just publish an article about that from an English guy wanted to write for us. And basically, what he's saying is that this is starting to become a problem. Not so much because, you need to compete with Android. I mean, a little bit of that. But he's saying that basically, the developers are doing a better job than Apple. There are apps in the App Store which are better than Apple's. And frankly, the iPhone and the iPad suffer because they're coming with substandard apps. I mean, the ultimate poster child for that is the weather app. Man, you want to talk about a complete, waste of time, from the app standpoint, but you can't delete it. I mean, it isn't something that comes up very often, so it's not like, it's you have to pay attention to it otherwise. But, again, nothing wrong with having a default app there for most people to use, but for anyone who does say, gee, I don't like this one. I want to use something better for my purposes. You can't in iOS. And that's something which, has been true on the Mac for a very, very long time. And it's starting to feel like Apple's preventing that purely from sort of competitive reasons. That, they don't want to let Google apps become default apps on iOS, even if the users would prefer that, because that would let Google have more of be more important in the iOS world. So that's why they got rid of Google, the Google Maps app, and replaced it with the Apple Maps app. And everyone went and downloaded the new Google Apps app afterwards because it works better. And so, that's the kind of thing I think which is frustrating, again, to some, of more demanding users, perhaps. And hopefully, we'll see some changes. Apple has acknowledged, and Tim Cook talked at the D11 conference, that they acknowledge that, some people want more control of the user experience. And, he said, but Apple's going to stop short of anything that will hurt the user experience. So it's sort of this interesting question of, my user experience is hurt by being hamstrung, but Joe random user would be hurt if it got too confusing for some reason. I don't know why it would necessarily get confusing, but they've got plenty of other things they can improve if they're worried about it being confusing. You can get lost in that settings app for a week.
Networking.
Bring food.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So it's a little after 8. We should wrap it up. Chuck, I don't know if you want to kind of wind things up here for us.
Yeah. Guys, thank you for having us.
Come on, you haven't wound me up enough already?
It's always great to talk to Mac user groups. We really appreciate you having us. Adam, I guess we'll see what happens next week at WWDC.
Yeah, and they better stay off my lawn, too.
Yeah. Bush hog.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. It was great.
Thanks for having us. It was great.
Thank you. Folks, that's a wrap on MacNotables. I'm Chuck Joiner. He's Adamapos. That's the Chicago Mac User Group. We will see you next time. Thanks for watching.
Bye.
Bye.
Visit MacVoices.com for links, show notes, to subscribe, to connect with Chuck on Twitter, app.net, Google+, Facebook, and for more Apple, Mac, and tech-related shows, including MacVoices, MacNotables, the Mac Jury, and the MacVoices Briefing. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com.